Today, we're going to dive into the story of a man who literally went from a nobody to the master of a continent, a leader whose ambition completely reshaped the world. This is the incredible story of Napoleon Bonaparte.
So let's set the scene. Our story kicks off on this rugged little island, Corsica. Now imagine you're this young soldier showing up in mainland France. You've got a thick accent, no powerful family, absolutely no money. You are, for all intents and purposes, a complete outsider.
And yet, somehow, just a few years later, you're not just a soldier anymore. You're the ruler of one of the most powerful nations on Earth. You literally crown yourself emperor, and almost an entire continent is bowing at your feet. I mean, that was the insane reality for Napoleon Bonaparte.
On the one hand, he was an absolute military genius. His armies completely redrew the map of Europe. But he wasn't just a conqueror. He was also a visionary reformer who rebuilt France's entire legal system from the ground up. So his influence was massive, both on the battlefield and, believe it or not, in the courtroom. But here's the thing. What happens when you have it all? Because after reaching the absolute peak of power, Napoleon lost everything, and his fall from grace was every bit as dramatic as his rise. So let's get into how it all came crashing down.
So the big question is, how did this total outsider climb so high, so incredibly fast? Well, his story really begins in a moment of pure chaos, a revolution that would turn the world upside down, and in doing so, create the perfect ladder for his ambition. Okay, so Napoleon was born way back in 1769 on Corsica. And you gotta remember, he wasn't French royalty or anything close to it. He was the son of a pretty minor noble family. At just 9 years old, he gets shipped off to military school in France, where he was a total outcast. Kids made fun of his Corsican accent. So what did he do? He just buried himself in his books, obsessing over history and military strategy.
And his timing? Well, it couldn't have been more perfect. Just as he's starting to rise through the army ranks, France explodes into revolution. The entire old system is shattered, creating all this chaos and uncertainty. For most people, it was terrifying. But for a driven, ambitious young officer like Napoleon, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. And his rise was, well, it was just unbelievably fast. In 1785, he's just a junior officer. By 1793, his smart, decisive military moves get him promoted to general. And then, in 1799, in this incredibly bold move, he stages a coup and seizes control of the entire French government. Just like that.
But, just leading the nation? That wasn't going to be enough. Napoleon had a vision for something so much bigger. He wasn't satisfied with being a first consul. No, he had his eyes on being an emperor. So in 1804, he makes one of the most audacious statements in all of European history. At his own coronation, he doesn't wait for the Pope to crown him, which was the tradition. Instead, he grabs the crown himself and places it right on his own head. The message was crystal clear. My power doesn't come from God or from tradition, it comes from me. As emperor, he just completely unleashed his military genius on the rest of Europe. He revolutionized his army, creating this force that was shockingly fast and precise. He just crushed his enemies, one after another, in these stunning victories across Italy, Austria, and Prussia. At his peak, he was pretty much the master of Europe. And this is where his legacy gets really complicated. Because in the lands he conquered, he often brought with him these revolutionary new ideas. Equality under the law, ending old feudal systems. But that ambition had a staggering cost. His constant wars caused unbelievable destruction and the loss of millions of lives. So, was he a liberator or a conqueror? The answer is kind of both. Now, let's step away from the battlefield for a second, because Napoleon's most enduring legacy might actually be something you'd find in a library, not a war museum. I'm talking about a book of laws. So, before Napoleon, French law was just a complete mess of old regional customs and ancient, confusing rules. He just swept all of that away and created the Napoleonic Code, a single, clear, logical set of laws for the whole country. It protected private property, it established legal equality for all male citizens, and it got rid of the old privileges of the aristocracy for good. And the influence of this code went way beyond France. It was so modern and so logical that countries all over Europe and even the world used it as a blueprint for their own legal systems. Seriously,
Even today, its core principles live on. That's a pretty incredible legacy for a guy most famous for his battles.
But here's the thing about an empire built on pure ambition: it's never truly secure. And for Napoleon, the very same drive that got him to the top would end up being the exact cause of his spectacular downfall.
The beginning of the end really boils down to one single colossal mistake: the invasion of Russia in 1812. He marched in with the largest European army ever seen, but he was defeated not just by soldiers, but by the brutal, unforgiving Russian winter. His forces starved and froze, and the losses, they were just catastrophic. It completely shattered the idea that he was invincible. After that disaster in Russia, his whole empire just crumbled. In 1814, he's forced to give up his throne in his exile to the island of Elba. Then he makes this one last, dramatic comeback, a period known as the 100 Days, but his fate was sealed at the Battle of Waterloo. His final years were spent as a prisoner on the super remote island of St. Helena, where he finally died in 1821. So after all that, the rise, the empire, the total collapse, why do we still talk about Napoleon? Why does he still matter? Well, his legacy is really complex, but he fundamentally changed the world in a few key ways. We can really break his legacy down into four main pillars. First, his wars completely redrew the map of Europe, creating new nations and sparking conflicts that would last for generations. Second, he spread the ideas of the French Revolution, things like equality and nationalism, all across the continent. Third, he modernized the law, creating a legal framework that still influences countries today. And finally, his life story itself is the ultimate lesson in what incredible ambition can achieve and what it can destroy. And that, right there, is the core tragedy of his life. His rise from absolutely nothing was a testament to his genius. But that same exact ambition that got him to the top, that endless hunger for more power, more glory, is precisely what led to his downfall. So, to sum it all up, you have this ambitious outsider who becomes the Emperor of France. He wins battles that military schools still study today, and he creates laws that are still in use. He completely reshaped Europe, leaving behind a legacy of both incredible progress and terrible destruction. And all of this leaves us with a really big, thought-provoking question that his life just forces us to ask. Is it enough to just be powerful? Or is the true measure of a great leader actually how wisely they use that power? Ultimately, Napoleon's story is just this powerful reminder that sometimes history really is shaped by the will of a single person. Their ambition, their genius, and their flaws can echo for centuries, creating the world we all live in today, for better and for worse.